An interview with Detroit School Superintendent Dr. Nikolai Vitti on the new school year, enrollment, and the most important concerns that kids and parents have. Plus headlines of the week and heading to Mexico to follow one Detroit woman's story of deportation. It's a One Detroit special report. Stay right there. MiWeek starts right now.
Did you know Roush Enterprises was selected by Google to assemble a test fleet of 100 prototype self-driving cars in 2015? It also produced the new Domino's delivery cars. And speaking of Domino's, Domino's sells well over 2 million pizzas per day around the world, and half of their sales are digital. These are just some of the ways Michigan's pioneers started out as small companies with big ideas.
We are business leaders for Michigan. We are committed to making Michigan a top 10 state for jobs, personal income, and a healthy economy. Masco Corporation is proud to manufacture innovative and environmentally friendly products for the home. Delta faucets, Craft-made in Maryland cabinets, and Behr brand paints have all been designed with you in mind. Masco and its family of companies, serving Michigan communities since 1929. Funding for this program is provided by Delta Airlines. Keep climbing.
Hi there and welcome to MiWeek. I'm Christy McDonald. We're so glad that you're joining us. We have a full table tonight ready to take on this week's headlines. Plus, we have an in-depth interview with Dr. Nikolai Vitti, the Detroit Schools Superintendent. He talks with Stephen Henderson and I about the beginning of the school year, his concerns, and things he's doing to try and make a difference. And we are also following the story of one Detroit woman's deportation. It's a hard look inside the immigration process, and our One Detroit crew heads to Mexico to see what happens when people get sent back to a country after spending the majority of their lives in America. That is all coming up. But we do start with Detroit School Superintendent Dr. Vitti. Stephen Henderson and I had a long conversation with him as an hour-long special on education that took place in the Brightmoor neighborhood of Detroit this past week. He answered questions from students and parents, plus was very frank about the organizational challenges he is facing and some of the solutions he plans to put in place. Take a look.
The amount of rebuilding that has to be done because of the lack of proper leadership.
It's not just on the academic side.
It's across the board in just about every aspect of the district.
Yeah.
You know, I can imagine when you head to all of these schools and every community meeting that you've been through since school has opened, that everyone's got a little something that they want to tell you or a little something that they want to say. What are some of the biggest concerns on parents' minds as they go back to school with their kids this year so far?
Well, I think we heard some of that tonight. Safety. We can't even talk about academics if children don't feel safe. I hear that often. I hear about the need for programming across all communities and all zip codes. You talk about, I often hear the need for high schools in all communities, especially where we are at right now. Years of mismanagement, not engaging the community authentically has led to deserts in this community in particular. That has been an overwhelming concern. And just a need for arts and music and restoring of that is something I hear consistently. And lastly, to pay employees at a higher level to be more competitive. Those are some of the things I often hear.
All right, and you just listed off a good list of things. So then how do you sit and say, how do I categorize where I'm going to start first and start to tick things down the line and say, hang on, we're getting to that point. How do you categorize all that?
Well, one thing the school board and I have focused on is strategic planning. One thing that you can't move a district to another place if you don't have a clear set of, you don't have a clear vision, mission, core values, priorities, strategies, and metrics that go along with that. And we already went through a board retreat to define those things. We've already engaged the community with over 15 sessions, where almost 400 people have been engaged. In fact, this week the board will review the revised strategic plan and put forth to them for a vote. And that will really be our guidepost on where we're headed. We're going to revise our budget for 18-19 to drive that strategic plan. And many of the things that I talked about that were mentioned as needs are already embedded in that strategic plan as a draft.
The other thing I heard in all of those things is the cash register ringing up, lots of costs. All of those things you talk about are going to cost money, and money has been the thing that we've struggled, the most with here in Detroit in terms of schools. Can you open a school in a community like Brightmoor where you don't have one? And if you do, where do you get the money for that?
Well, one thing that we have to recognize is that money needs to drive priorities. We need to be transparent with how we use our dollars. We have to have line item budgets. We have to have revenue clearly articulated and expenditures clearly articulated, driven by that strategic plan, not done randomly, not done by politics, not done by who meets with the superintendent last or who meets with the school board last, but truly focused on children. So revising that budget, we've already started to do that. We'll continue to do that throughout this year to next year to drive priorities. And then after that, we have to know what the gap is as far as what we need to deliver to children. And that's where lobbying in Tallahassee and Lansing is going to be important. I always say Lansing.
Florida again.
I say that often. But you know, the need for a weighted student formula is going to be important. Yeah. We have to get to a point where to educate a child in Birmingham is not the same cost to educate a child in Detroit. Right. And we have to see weighted student formula funding for poverty, for special needs children, for English language learners. Because again, if we're really about equal opportunity, then you have to fund public education appropriately. And then lastly, we have to have accountability with what we spend our money on. And that's been lacking in years previously in Detroit. Specifically for a school in this area, we're going to do a facilities review throughout the entire district, understand the gap between where schools are for facilities and where is the academic standard for 2021, understand the gap throughout the district, recognize residential growth declines, and then start to make some decisions in the next 2 to 3 years on where we build new schools, maybe where we consolidate schools, but to actually have a comprehensive plan so that every community has access to a K-8 and a high school, and students don't have to get on a bus to travel 2 to 3 hours in order to access school.
Yeah. Talk a little about how that weighted formula works where you used to work in Florida. They do it differently than we do here in Michigan, right?
Well, unfortunately, Florida and Michigan aren't much different when you look at pure pupil funding throughout the nation. They rank 40th below, depending on the year. There was a bit more weighted student formula or funding for students that are special needs, but that's about it in Florida. Florida is by far not the model when you look at per pupil funding.
What is the model, you think?
Well, I think you look at places like Massachusetts, where you adequately fund public education for the most part. You provide extra resources for students in special needs. You're looking deeper for poverty, and you treat low-performing schools with extra support, not with penalties and sanctions in order to move the closure.
We're all parents up here on the stage. We've got a lot of parents in here. I know when I go into a classroom with my kids, I want to make sure that there's a teacher in front of the classroom. They've got the textbooks that they're going to be able to use, and that there's not an overwhelming number of kids that are actually in that classroom. Talk to us specifically right now what teacher vacancy number that you're looking at in terms of leveling classroom size where you're at right now.
Right, so right now we have 194 vacancies as of today. Last year, the district started with 276 vacancies. This year, we started with 250, plus adding 11 EAA schools, which were about 250 extra teachers. So apples to apples, we've actually improved. Over the summer, in only a month, we hired over 200 teachers. So we know we can recruit and retain teachers in Detroit. We just have to have a proactive strategy to do that. Last year, from January to the end of the year, the district only hired 30 teachers. That was last year. So this year, we're much ahead of that. We're leveling right now based on actual enrollment. Enrollment, as I said, is trending a bit higher than last year, so we're in a positive direction. Leveling means that schools that have an increase in enrollment will see an additional allocation. Those that decline will see fewer. And then we're going to look at class size. And that's something that we have to address within our budget. But it's really not necessarily a fiscal issue right now. It's a teacher recruitment issue, meaning we can add teachers to the budget, but if we don't have teachers to fill those positions, they just remain empty. Or vacant. We're not including long-term subs as full-time teachers, and we've only hired fully certified teachers. We're not lowering the bar in that area at all. We're still hiring fully certified teachers. I believe that this time next year we'll have a different conversation about vacancies. I think this summer proves we can recruit teachers. We just have to have a longer runway in order to recruit in advance and not scurry with only a couple of weeks, months before the school year started.
All right, to see our entire interview with Dr. Vitti as part of our American Black Journal One Detroit Education Roadshow, just head to our website, MiWeek.org. All right, turning now to the headlines of the week, and there have been many. Nolan Finley is off tonight, so we brought in a crew to keep Stephen Henderson company and give him a bit of a debate. You heard us talking already. Let's welcome back Kaitlyn Buss. She's a columnist for the Detroit News. Kaitlyn, it's always good to see you. Next to her is Dennis Darnoi, Republican strategist. Hey, Dennis, it's good to see you. Welcome back. And also with us, Keith Owens, senior editor of the Michigan Chronicle. Keith, it's good to have you with us as well. And of course, our MiWeek contributor, Stephen Henderson, editorial page editor of the Detroit Free Press. You guys have all been on the show before, but not all together in this combination. So it's great to have you back here. All right, a lot of headlines this week, but we have to talk about the national anthem protests, and not just really what happened with the NFL on Sunday, but moving it forward to the Michigan State Police Chief, who came out this week. She posted something on her personal Facebook page, Christy Kibbe E2, and it was a meme that condemned the degenerates, that's in the quote there, that kneeled for the anthem. She has since apologized, and Governor Snyder says he's not going to be removing her from her job. She said initially that her post wasn't about race. I'm going to start with you, Stephen, and say, how could it not have been construed about race?
Well, it couldn't have been. I mean, not in any sort of reasonable context. The people who are doing this, beginning with Colin Kaepernick, but not limited to him, are doing it in protest of police misconduct against African Americans. And so I don't think you get to sort of pick out of that context to sort of answer back to that protest. If you are critical, I suppose, of the form of the protest, that may be a little different, but I think even that is very difficult to separate from the message here. The message here is that Black lives don't matter as much as they should. They need to matter more, and they need to matter more to police. And for a police chief to push back that way, there is absolutely no way to see that in non-racial terms, I don't think.
Kaitlyn, let me ask you, do you believe that Governor Snyder should have removed her from her post?
You know, I think what she did was incredibly tone deaf. I mean, you know, particularly in this environment right now. It shows her true colors. And I think that personal Facebook pages are becoming public domain. I mean, I think it's hard to say, well, that was, you know, I saw some justification, that was a personal page. You know, she's a public figure. And I think that his support for her following it was wrong. Maybe not removal, but certainly some reprimanding and you know, taking on what she did seriously.
You know, Dennis, we talk a lot about institutional racism, and it's very hard for people to see. And the Michigan State Police, they do a lot of policing in the city of Detroit, for people to not look and say, well, this is the person who is leading the charge here. How can that not trickle down the effect?
Sure. I mean, you know, a person in her position has to be aware, as Kaitlyn said, that she is a public figure, and whether it was on a private Facebook page or somewhere else, it has ramifications. So it was an unfortunate incident. I do think Governor Snyder was correct in not removing her, but she did violate MSP policy and should receive a reprimand for that.
You know, Keith, people are talking about protests maybe coming up this weekend, and we also had some people who were very upset about it on the Florida legislature this week. What do you think that we're going to be seeing going forward here?
Well, I think it'll be fairly strong. I mean, we're coming behind the protests for Kid Rock. You know, and I think that the heightened sensitivity to racism, racial issues, you know, was a heightened sensitivity to police brutality. And I think that also the question has been raised is that, well, two things. One, in terms of reposting on private Facebook, that's no longer a defense. I think everybody knows that you can't hide behind that. The other thing is that when you're talking about why wasn't there also a protest about Charlottesville? I mean, if you're offended about this, you know, I mean, we don't hear the same outrage, you know, what happened with neo-Nazis expressing stuff like that. So it's like if you're upset with that, you know, you're upset with somebody not standing for the national anthem, but you don't have somebody marching down the street carrying torches on neo-Nazis. I mean, so I think that was this fireable? I don't know, you pretend to want to fire everybody, but I think that, in terms of a reprimand, absolutely, and I wouldn't have had a problem if they did fire her, because it's a very serious offense.
Stephen?
Yeah, I mean, people are trying to make this about speech, and there's no question, she has the right to say what she said. What she doesn't have the right to do is lead an agency that has the right to kill with that sentiment. I mean, there's a difference between speech and authority. There's a difference between speech and power, and this is someone with an awful lot of power, and if what she's saying is that she is prepared to wield that power along the racist ideology that she espoused, then she doesn't belong in the job.
You know, we talk a little bit about Facebook, and it's that arena where people are actually giving what their true feelings are and what they truly believe. Dennis, when are we going to give people who are in power, maybe starting with the President of the United States on down, a little social media one-on-one in terms of when you're posting things that is truly what you think and people are going to truly see it?
Well, I think a number of institutions have already done that, and I think there are policies out there, just people choose not to follow it. You know, very simple solution: make everything you do private. You know, if you're a public figure, your Facebook page, if it's going to be public, then you know it's open there for debate. But if it's private, then that's something totally different.
All right, you know what, something else this week that I saw in the Detroit News, actually, Kaitlyn, so I'm going to start with you, talking about, is Detroit ready for the jobs and development that are coming downtown? You know, Dan Gilbert, Bedrock, they've been announcing they're going to be building the new place on the old Hudson site. They're going to be rehabbing a lot of buildings. They're going to have workers coming down. Detroit is trying to go for the Amazon headquarters. And in the Detroit News, there was an editorial saying, you know, are we ready? And we should get ready, because there's a lot of different things that maybe we're missing to have this influx here. Kaitlyn, why don't you go ahead and talk a little bit about this? Are we ready for all of this?
You know, I don't think that we're completely ready. I think there's a lot of work to be done in order to attract the world-class kind of stuff that we're looking at, like Amazon. No doubt, you know, Dan Gilbert is probably up to that challenge, and I wish him the best of luck, but you know, our transit's still not there, and that doesn't mean we need to go back, you know, to the proposal that failed last year, but we need to be looking at real solutions, maybe incorporating some, like we said in the editorial, modern, you know, upcoming modes of sharing transportation. But the skilled trades is also just, I mean, the biggest problem to me. I mean, you know, companies have already been fined for not being able to find Detroit workers. The talent's just not there, and I know the city's pushing to get people into those skilled trades, but I mean, even more needs to be done. We're just not there yet.
Hey Keith, when does a good problem to have become a bit of a problem, like that we can't actually keep up with the pace of development and the jobs that need to be filled here, and the fact that, yeah, transit, they still don't have a comprehensive plan that they want to put back on a ballot, and education?
That's the thing that's kind of I wouldn't say disheartening, but it just kind of catches you, because we've always been wanting jobs. I mean, that's the thing, one more job, we want more jobs for Detroit and everything, and now here they come. And I think that the issues with this kind of gets back to, you know, earlier you interviewed Dr. Vitti, and this kind of comes back to a degree on his shoulders, in the sense of what he's going to have to face in terms of DPSCD, because we're talking about the condition of the kids coming out of these schools and what they're ready for and what they're not ready for based on the condition of schools. And so a lot of what's happening is the children are not prepared yet. It's not a matter of that. This has nothing to do with their intelligence or ability. It has to do with what they've been equipped with. And I think that now what we're faced with is that the opportunities are coming in before we've had a chance to get everything else up to par. And those two things are coming to a head, so it's causing a problem for us.
All right, but we've been waiting for this. We been waiting for this kind of development. We've been asking for the expansion. And we say we are, but you know, is it being the wet blanket of saying, gosh, are we truly prepared for this?
See, I don't know that that's I don't know it's being a wet blanket. I do think there has to be sort of a realistic self-assessment that goes along with all of this, right? So let's make a big play for Amazon, but let's be honest about the deficits that we have that would prevent us from landing something like that, and not just talk about it in the context of this sort of situation, but let's talk about it going forward. What are we going to do about the fact that people are not trained? We talk about it all the time. We're not doing the things that would actually reverse those numbers. Transit, you know, 40 some years in this community, we've not had mass transit that gets people from work to jobs or from school to home or whatever. We never do anything about it. And so maybe this is the catalyst to change that behavior. And we ought to, I think Dan Gilbert ought to be honest about that, right? This is maybe not going to work, but let's talk about what will.
Yeah, I know, but I think you hit the nail on the head when you say let's talk about what will, but let's get beyond the, well, we've got things, we've got issues that we've got to take care of, to actual, you know, then connecting the dots in Lansing and saying, what are the policy changes or what are the differences that we have to do, Dennis, to make some of these things, instead of, you know, in 10 years, if we're going to make a bid for another big corporation, that we're actually ready for something like that.
Well, and I think that's the point. I mean, I think there is value in the challenge, even if you fail. So if we do go after the Amazon headquarters and don't get it, there's still going to be value in going through that process, and then maybe there is another one that comes down the line that we're better prepared to go after and get.
I agree with Dennis. If I could just say real quick, I agree very much with Dennis in the sense that you can't. I would never say don't bring the challenge. I would never say send the jobs back. That's not the point. But maybe that will force us to rise to the challenge. That's the thing. We do have problems, things we need to face. But I agree. But just because we failed, I'm going to keep on trying.
Yeah, and I think that Amazon headquarters in the bid for that is one thing, but it's also the reality of what is actually coming and the construction that will be starting here and the density of people who will be coming downtown. And when you're looking at parking and when you're looking at where people are going to live and that sort of things, that those are things that we will have to deal with whether or not Amazon actually comes here. Last word on this, Stephen.
Yeah, you think about the bridge, you think about this skyscraper, you think about the other things that are going to happen. We need a lot of skilled trade experts to be able to fill those jobs, and we got to create them in the city as well as out in the suburbs.
All right, and we're going to have to leave it there. Thanks you guys so much for coming in. Kaitlyn Buss, Dennis Darnoi, Keith Owens, and of course Stephen Henderson. We'll see you back here next week.
I'll be back maybe.
Or maybe. Maybe, if we give you a free mug, right? Well, finally tonight, the complicated stories of immigration and deportation that are playing out around the country and here in Detroit. We introduced you to Maria Juarez in May, and we followed her deportation case in real time. She lived in Southwest Detroit with her husband, a U.S. citizen, and their little boy. Here at Detroit Public Television, as part of our One Detroit coverage, we teamed up with Bridge Magazine to follow the process of Maria fighting deportation to Mexico, a country she hasn't been in since she was 8 months old. In late May, she got the news on her appeal. Bridge's Chastity Pratt-Dawsey is with Maria Garcia Juarez. Maria lives in Southwest Detroit with her husband Eric and their son David. All are U.S. citizens except for Maria.
So in 3 weeks, what happens?
I have to leave the country or they will come and get me.
Maria refers to Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE. She was brought to Salinas, California at 8 months of age. Crimes and gangs are a way of life there. Bouncing around from relatives to foster families, Maria was arrested at age 17 for being in a stolen car.
We really didn't know anything better. We grew up around that environment.
At 18, she moved to Detroit and lived with her aunt and sister. Now she's 23 years old and pretty much a solid citizen, employed, attending college classes, and becoming a wife and mother. In January 2017, her husband Eric was diagnosed with cancer. He wanted to talk, but not on camera.
The truth is that in the next few weeks, my wife is going to be gone. I gotta figure out how I'm gonna do with my son. Gotta figure out how I'm gonna do with my sickness. Try to stay strong.
Then came her deportation papers. ICE gave her a choice. Buy your own ticket or let the U.S. government drop you anywhere.
I know I have family there. I don't know them. I don't have communication with them. I'm still hopeful that a miracle can happen. Something can happen.
With time running out, Maria's attorneys petitioned immigration to let her stay in the U.S.
We've, in about 24 hours, put together a DACA application and an emergency stay of removal.
Friday, May 26, 2017. Maria and her family arrive at Detroit Metro Airport to meet ICE agents. Here she will find out if her stay is approved.
To go? To go?
The family says it's final goodbyes. Maria must board her flight. Destination, Guanajuato, Mexico. We haven't forgotten Maria. Chastity Pratt-Dawsey of Bridge Magazine and Bill Kubota of Detroit Public TV are in Mexico this week. They are reuniting with Maria since she left and telling the story really of what is next for her and her family and the impact of immigration policies and decisions. Along the way, Chastity has met other people deported from the U.S. trying to make their way in their native country that is really unfamiliar.
We're going to see Daniel Arenas. He lived in America for 14 years. From the time he's 4 to the time he's in high school. He found out he couldn't get into college in America because it was undocumented, and so he came back here to Mexico and he started an organization called Dream in Mexico. And so we're going to talk to him about what it's like being an Americanized Mexican, having to come back to Mexico and the challenges, the barriers, what you lose, what you gain. He's a Really interesting guy.
It says in Mexico, there's also dreams. En México también hay sueños.
Gotcha.
And then in the back, it's the organization.
Dream in Mexico. This is 2017, and Trump is promising to send more and more dreamers back to where they came from. And so they don't have a choice, is what Daniel said. They don't have a choice. Sometimes the only option is to go back to your homeland and figure it out. Figure it out. And he's figuring it out, and he's helping other people to figure it out. And maybe Maria can get some help with figuring it out through Daniel and his connections.
Now we look forward to Chastity and Bill's reports when they get back. They have also been posting videos online from their time in Mexico this week. If you'd like to get caught up on all of Maria's stories, just head to our website for the comprehensive reporting from One Detroit and Bridge Magazine at MiWeek.org. That's going to do it for My Week. Thanks so much for joining me. We'll be back next Thursday. Until then, you can find us MiWeek.org, Facebook, and Twitter. I'm Christy McDonald. For all of us at Detroit Public TV, thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
Did you know Gordon Food Service was started by a 23-year-old entrepreneur as a butter and egg delivery business more than a century ago? In 1948, school teacher Gerard Wendell Hayworth borrowed $10,000 from his parents to start a woodworking operation in his family's garage. It's now Hayworth Incorporated. These are just some of the ways Michigan's pioneers started out as small companies with big ideas.
We are business leaders for Michigan. We are committed to making Michigan a top 10 state for jobs, personal income, and a healthy economy. Masco Corporation is proud to manufacture innovative and environmentally friendly products for the home. Delta faucets, craft-made in Merillat cabinets, and Behr brand paints have all been designed with you in mind. Masco and its family of companies, serving Michigan communities since 1929. Funding for this program is provided by Delta Airlines. Keep climbing.